sometimes, God, it's so obvious that I hate to use this phrase, but you see the kid, he gets it. We say it all the time, he gets it. So, Spike Albrecht, one of our young men who's had a sensational career, it was like we are very truthful with them, knowing that the time is a friend of truth, and that we're telling them, you're only going to play 5 or 10 minutes a game. Do you understand that for 4 years? Do you understand that that's probably your max? You may go over, but that's probably it. Yes, sir. Yes, sir, I understand that. Where I think if we'd gone into that situation with him or someone else and say, hey, we see you as being the next superstar, even though we think we didn't need that at that time, we might have either not gotten Spike, or he would have come in and said they weren't really truthful to us. So I think as we search this out, we under-promise, and then we hope to over-deliver, to make sure they get it, they understand this is about the team. When we're recruiting guys, that every player we recruit thinks he's an NBA player, right? So, and that's fine. We don't want guys that necessarily are in a hurry to get there. They want to embrace. If they're in a hurry, that's good, and they're probably wonderful people. That's just not for the team concept. So that, I think, goes in all parts of life, that people that are in a hurry for their next job aren't going to do well in their job they have right now, and it's really worked well for us. Well, we watch a lot of video, and we also, obviously, in our practices, we will make a bigger to-do about the guy that threw the pass than the guy that scored the basket, the guy that dove on the floor as opposed to the guy that was on ESPN highlights. We're just always given this positive team reinforcement for the people that do the little things. And as a result, there's really the young man we're teaching, the staff as well, that there's two teams there, that there's never a time that I want them to have a suggestion which I don't think was a good idea. Think that wasn't a good idea. It wasn't something I thought about. That is a terrific thought for right now. I try not to leave them out there too much and say, but we're not going to use it right now, but I'm going to keep it in the back of my mind, maybe someday. And the same thing with as we get our team on board. I know there's going to be struggles during the year. I got to make that kid think he's really important to the team, even if he doesn't think he is.
The first thing you want people to think about is, how do I bring different thinking to the team? And it's just not a plug for diversity. I think it's a reality of life, right? If you look at the best ecosystems in the world, it's because people of different mind come together to produce greatness. And so that's the first thing I would, suggest to people: don't surround yourself with people that look like yourself. Secondly, or I don't mean look just in physicalness, but have the same educational background, go to the same spin class, whatever it is, right? Secondly, understand what you're really good at and what the gap is to what you're really good at. So if you have this real sense of self and you can be realistic about the skills that really could be leveraged and can go out and collect those skills, that collective team's going to be more effective.
So we've talked a lot about, in terms of designing your team, both composition, goals. Let's do a quick recap of some of the key concepts and principles that we've talked about as part of this first session. One of the things we talked about was team size. Too big, too small, just right. There are trade-offs in terms of, as your team gets too large, some of those process and coordination costs. But then if too small, you're not really taking the full advantage of that team. And so one of the things you're going to want to think about is, how big is your team? And does it fit into that sweet spot of, say, 5 to 10 members of your team? If it's larger than that, what are the costs? If it's smaller than that, are you really taking advantage of that team concept to drive results for your organization? We talked about both surface and deep level diversity, demographics, personality, values. We talked about the concept of perceived person-group fit. We also talked about some of the fault lines that exist in teams when you have either surface or deep level attributes that are creating some of these fault lines in the group where people are different on multiple dimensions, but you have these subgroups and how that can create some conflict or lack of coordination in your team. So you have to be very, very careful on those demographic fault lines. And then team goals. We talked about some of the trade-offs with learning performance goals, how important shared commitment is to some of those goals. So I want you to remember these key concepts in terms of designing your team. Some very simple, team size, some much more complex in terms of composition with respect to surface and deep level diversity. And some of those best practices for how to establish really effective goals in your teams. Those are the key concepts in terms of designing your team that you want to keep in mind. In our next session, we'll come back and talk about team structure, both formal structures and informal structures, and how important those structures are for driving results and performance in your team, and some of the best practices that you can use to create effective structures for your team going forward.